Good morning and welcome to our 62nd episode of Business Unusual. I'm pretty excited. It's been, seems like it's been we should have a way of measuring pandemic years that's similar to dog years, only instead of it being 1 year or 7 years, I think we probably had like 20 years crammed into 1 year with 2020. So anyway, maybe that's just me, but thanks for hanging with us and for joining us today. We're going to have a lot of fun. I'm Brendan Filbert, managing partner with SalesWorks, and my job all day, every day is helping people find and secure their next opportunity, whether it be a brand new client that fits their perfect prospect profile or their next engagement, or perhaps they're pursuing fractional services. So whatever your reason is, if you are looking for something new in your business, you're in the right spot. And I am excited today to introduce you to one of my favorite clients and influencers and referral partners and just all around amazing lady. Liz Megli is joining us, and I'm going to have her do a quick intro and then dive into her presentation today, which is all about proposals. So Liz, share a little bit about kind of your background so that people can kind of put the context.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Brendan. I'm so happy to be here. I founded a company called Theme Strategic Proposals 4 years ago, and we specialize in helping small businesses win large bids and proposals through the proposal management, strategy, design, and writing process. So small businesses are our specialty, and so I'm really excited to speak to those on the call who either help small businesses or run a small business themselves, and then also other fractional service providers, because that's my background as well.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I am super excited for you to just kind of dive in and walk us through the things that let's just start from the startup side. Is that okay? Where
yes.
You share with us kind of if we were just getting kicked off with our business, what do we need to know about preparing for our first proposal?
Yeah, absolutely. So a question that I get asked quite a bit is someone asks me to send them a bid or a proposal, and how do I know what my customer wants to see? So that's kind of the overarching question or the big question that everything we talk about today is geared towards. And there's a lot of tips that we have for how to prepare, either if you're a brand new fractional service provider or you've been in business and you're just looking to refine your sales process. These are tips that everyone can take away. So as far as that big question, send me a proposal. Well, they may not provide you much detail if it's an informal request. So I like to differentiate formal requests for proposals as RFPs. Those are typically issued by large corporations or government agencies, whether that's like the city of Kansas City or the USDA, for example. But what happens a lot of times for smaller businesses is they get requests for these I call them the informal proposals. Send me a quote, send me your proposal. Well, what did they request? Did they request just a price, your scope of work and a price, a full proposal? And sometimes they might not know what they're asking for. And so it's really up to you as their prospective, consultant to shape and define what that client wants. So I would say a lot of people seem to really dread preparing that written proposal in the process for closing business, but it doesn't have to be a dreaded step. It really is a chance for you to further establish and deepen your relationship with that prospective client by working with them to define their scope, budget, schedule, and really begin to understand how you can resolve and address their pain points.
So hang on right there. I want to stop you because I want to emphasize something that Liz just shared that could be a huge nugget that you all take out of today. So Liz talked about how you do that with your client. And the more you actually engage your client in this conversation and in preparing what this will look like, the more likely your proposal will actually close. And that specifically, if you want to get your proposals to where you're closing 80% or more, the more you do that with Liz, the more likely you're going to be way up there in the chances of winning the work.
Yeah, you're so right, Brendan. And I think all of the best practices you teach with prospecting and sales really come together nicely with the best practices that I teach and use with proposal management. So we both are, I would say, experts in different segments of the business development lifecycle. So it's really great to have a conversation with you about this because you have that perspective of the client persona and really speaking to exactly what your client needs. And then I help people translate that into their proposals. So like we just talked about.
That's the reason you are here talking about this topic, because I am all about finding people that are the experts in their lane in the area of and the sales process is so big, and it can, I mean, if you think about it, everything from that very first where you're brand building to your lead generation effort to nurturing the prospect to creating, you know, your qualification process, all these elements of it. And the thing that I love about your approach, Liz, is you bring the closing forward into the process where you make it more likely and interactive throughout that you will come to an agreement with that client, because it's not something that you just throw over the fence at the finish line of the sales process. And that's what I really, really want to emphasize here. And I mean, I just keep coming back to this point, is it should be threaded throughout the entirety of your sales process.
Yes.
So
yeah, exactly. You should be, exactly. Like from that first meeting or, you know, meeting with a prospective client, you should really be trying to understand what kind of help they need and start crafting in your mind that solution that you could provide for them. So I guess I am speaking more to service providers, but this definitely works with people that are selling products as well. And your proposal, so speaking specifically to the informal proposals here, your proposal should not necessarily be just a one-page sheet with your price. I really advocate for providing enough information that there is no doubt in your client's mind that you are the best choice for them. So I typically recommend that you include a cover letter, an understanding of the project, your scope of work for everything that you will provide, your recommendations and proposed solution for how to go about that, your cost or pricing options, and qualifications. Why are you the best fit? And your qualifications, we'll get into more details of what that entails in a couple slides from now. So like we just talked about, if they don't provide specifics for what they're looking for, that is an open door for you to ask and engage with them more. So I typically recommend saying something like, oh, hey, yes, I'm happy to provide you a proposal. I typically provide an overview of the scope of work, a summary of my qualifications, and pricing. Does that sound good to you, or is there something else that you'd like to see in the proposal? So you can really refine really hone in on exactly what they want to see. And Brendan may have some suggestions on this, but depending on the client, you can even ask them at this time what their budget is, or if they have kind of a budget in mind.
And the answer to that, I can almost guarantee, is going to be no, we're looking for it from you. And it's one of those things that I love if you ask that question 3 different places in 3 different ways throughout your early conversations with a prospect. So the more you can ask questions about how much have you set aside for this project? What, in the past when you've done projects like this, how did you allocate budget? What would you say you would set aside as a portion for addressing the issue? I mean, even though they're going to ask you that question, the question Liz asked, they almost always say no, or it's a yes, but I'm not telling you. And you have all kinds of that, but just keep asking. So you're going to circle right back around to it. Don't give up. You will get there. Okay.
Yeah, and one last note on pricing is I always, and I know we have a fractional CFO on the call, so he may have some opinions on this. Feel free to share in the chat, but I personally prefer to provide pricing options so that they can kind of have a menu of services. So that way, if your full service package isn't hitting the mark exactly with their budget, they could maybe engage with you in a different way as well. So that way you're still closing the sale and opening that door for further work.
A fantastic solution.
Yes. So I always love to say in the sales and proposal process, like, don't get anxious or nervous about how you're going to do, just get ready, be prepared. So I always recommend proactively developing materials so that you have a framework in place. I think someone mentioned like one of their goals is for them to be able to standardize their proposals more to make it a little more streamlined. And so these are the items that I recommend having prepared so that your proposals, so it will be a little bit easier for you to develop these proposals more quickly when the opportunities arise. So the list of items I recommend that you begin developing, if you haven't already, is a qualification statement. We'll go into what all that includes in a few slides. A capability statement, a cover letter, a draft statement of work, or maybe multiple statements of work depending on the services you provide, a standard contract, or I call it an engagement letter, and also your standard fees, and a sales presentation deck. And if there are teaming partners that you think that you'll engage or that you've talked to in the past or you know would be perfect for a future opportunity, go ahead and try to get their rates as well so that there's no holdups in the sales process waiting on them to provide that information. And one note, while I recommend having this, I would call it a library of assets to use in your sales process, you should always customize these materials to the specific client and opportunity. So you might have some great boilerplate, but customize it exactly to the client. I always recommend using the client's name before your name in any written documents, talking about the client more than you talk about yourself, which is kind of a challenge, and just try to be very mindful of presenting all of your information in a client-focused manner.
Great advice.
And so then going into a little more detail about why I recommend having a qualification and capability statement to sell your services or product, and what do these documents look like. So the qualification statement, you may hear it more formally in government world called an SOQ, a statement of qualifications. But even if you're not bidding on formal government contracts, having a qualification statement ready to go will help you really put your best foot forward in any sales opportunity. So the qual statement provides potential customers with enough information, like I mentioned, to determine that you're the best fit for the project. And the qual statement would typically, and this is just a screenshot, sorry, of an example statement of qualifications. It could be formatted as a slide deck in a landscape view. I like to do a little bit more formal style, so I would prefer like a typical 8.5 by 11 PDF. But if you Google statements of qualifications, you'll see a lot of different examples out there, and you'll probably see some ones you like and some you don't like.
Now, Liz, didn't you write a blog about this as far as what needs to be? Because I remember seeing that, and it was so comprehensive. So here's what I'll do. When I send the recording out, could you send me the link to that, and I'll include that as an additional piece of collateral that'll help them dig into that a little bit deeper, because that is something that you do that truly does set you up and establish your brand in the early in the stages of the proposal. So it's they open it up and they're right away immediately taken to what you bring to the table that probably your competitors aren't putting in front of them.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the blog post is a great way to get started. It kind of helps you basically outline exactly what should go in there and how to write it. And just a quick overview here on the screen are some of the main sections I recommend including in your qualification statement. So a company overview, you want to make sure to feature any relevant certifications you have, years of experience, including client testimonials is wonderful. You could do just like a call out quote from a client, or depending on your business, you could do actual like half page or 1 page case studies or project experience narrative, include a list of your services or products, and depending on your business, you might want to include insurance information, safety or quality control information. So this document could be as short as 3 or 4 pages, a company overview, a page for your team bios, a page for your project experience, or it could be, I've seen some that are maybe 10 to 15 pages in length. And again, you'll want to customize this. So if your clients are primarily small retail businesses, you would want your experience section to mirror that prospective client and feature, similar clients that you've worked with. But if it's an engineering company, then you would want to try to have those more professional service type project experiences featured.
Fantastic.
And a capability statement. This is considered a must-have sales document for networking with large businesses and government contracting officers and decision makers. So whether you are trying to pursue work with, in the B2B sector or B2G sector, this document will serve you well. It's a great way to introduce your company, the main services that you provide. If you have any small business certifications, your DUNS number, the date you were established, who should they contact, what's your website, those types of differentiators. So this is just a screenshot you can see here of an example capability statement. And again, if you don't have one yet, you can definitely go to Google to see some examples for how to get started. This is also something that myself or others can help you with. And I do have a plug at the very end for some of my favorite resources to help with proposals. And one of those resources might be able to help you with this for free as well.
Great info.
So then transitioning to the formal request for proposals, I'm not sure, I know our audience is kind of a mix of fractional service providers and small business owners or decision makers. And we'll just talk a little bit about formal RFPs. So everything we've just discussed is how to tackle those informal sales requests for, quotes and proposals. But the RFP, request for proposal, is a very formal document, typically issued by a government agency, though large businesses do issue them as well. And the difference between the informal and the formal is the RFP will state exactly what you have to provide, the exact order it must be provided in, the exact date and time that you have to submit it by, and it will have a lot of requirements for you to review. So if you receive an RFP, the first thing you want to do is read it. Read it carefully to see if you can meet all the requirements. As you're reading it, if you see things like red flags and you don't want to respond to it, you don't have to keep reading it. Some might be 2 pages long, some might be 100 pages long. But if you keep reading and you feel like you are qualified enough to win and can competitively price your proposal, then you would consider responding to it. So some of the requirements that you'd want to look for in an RFP to see if it's a good fit for you would be, can you meet the schedules? Can you meet the technical requirements? Can you meet experience requirements? The requirements for personnel qualifications. Sometimes they'll disclose their budget, sometimes they won't. Often not, but sometimes. And can you meet like the actual contractual requirements like insurance and things like that? So responding to formal RFPs, it's kind of like I would say the 3 ways that you have to win, the 3 things you have to do to win a formal RFP. You have to already have a relationship with the client. Your response has to be completely compliant and responsive to the RFP requirements, and it also has to be a persuasive sales document. So it's a blend of technical and persuasive communications. And I didn't really build out my full slide deck for going into all the details for how to respond to RFPs. I know Brendan and we chatted about that more in detail a year ago, right? In July of 2020. So that's one that you could reference in the archives for more details on RFPs.
And I will also include the links to that episode when I send out this email. So you're basically going to end up with a full library of content around RFPs. But I will, if it's okay, can I give just a really quick example, Liz, of where I've worked with you? So I actually had a client that was evaluating whether or not they were going to recruit a salesperson. And the interesting thing about identifying who your target audience is and who you want to serve, and when we started this conversation, we've got one of our audience that shared that they've never pursued government work before. They've never pursued entities that a set aside or designation in your business or certification would give them a leg up with. And the interesting thing about the pandemic is all bets are off in terms of where your market has been and where you're going and what you want to do. And what's interesting about evaluating the opportunities that are out there is if you sit back and think about how to reframe your business and your business development process. I had this client that was a manufacturer that had been doing, and they are a medical manufacturer, so they've been working primarily with doctors' offices and medical clinics that were independent. And they were evaluating if they wanted to recruit a salesperson and pay them commission as well as a base salary, benefits, taxes, all that other fun stuff that goes into having an employee. And I assessed out of their client list, they had a couple of clients that were government. And I also knew that the business was owned by a woman. And I knew that she also had Native American heritage. And so she actually obtained a designation as a Native American owned business, as well as minority owned business, and a woman owned business. So she had like the trifecta of all the certifications. And I thought, that kind of made it a no-brainer for her to go pursue this type of work. So rather than hiring a business developer, I actually introduced her to Liz. And it was funny because fast forward, I guess it was just a few months later, I got a call from the client that said, well, I guess I'm not going to be hiring a salesperson and putting $1 million quota in front of them, because Liz just won us 3 contracts that are in excess of 15 million over 5 years. So we're set now. So the thing that's fun about looking at this process is it truly does turn your business development approach kind of on its head. And it's a completely different avenue. So much like you may have a website and a lead generation effort that is focused on an automated sales cycle, and you have people out on the street, you also need to be evaluating if putting together an RFP process and perhaps pursuing work either with corporations, bigger companies, or the government. I mean, there's so much opportunity right now that we're seeing. So that's something I was super excited to have Liz just come and have a conversation with us about this. So now with this, you've covered a ton of ground. And I'd love to just really quick check in and see what questions we have from our audience, because I actually have a couple as well. So let's play Stump the Teacher. And let's see where she can help you with your business. So if you want to take just a minute, chat in any questions that you have, and we can dive into those. So I do have one that I want to make sure that I ask you about. So when you're talking about that, creating a statement of qualifications, I've always had a tendency we want to put the client first, right? And we want to really emphasize everything from the client experience perspective. How would you recommend we do that with a statement of qualifications that's bragging about, this is how great I am?
Yeah, definitely. So the easiest way to do that is for every page in your introductory paragraph to customize it, like we talked about, to use the client name before your name. So it can be something as simple as stating, Acme Flooring Company needs a sales and marketing partner to help increase its annual revenue. Something as simple as that. And then you transition to, this is why we are that partner, and you would provide a proof point. So you can still you still obviously have to talk about your business and why you are a great fit, but you always want to frame it around that, in that client-focused manner. Same thing with the project experience. That's the section where you would actually provide an introductory statement about how they can verify you have experience that's relevant to their needs by reviewing these projects of similar work that you've done. So just trying to kind of flip your mindset of the qualification statement helps solidify in their mind that we're a great fit, but it also needs to be customized in a way that puts the client first.
So you can feature the social proof aspect in case studies or testimonials from other happy clients throughout this?
Yeah, definitely. And, nobody says you're an expert better than your clients. So while we can say we're the greatest marketing company ever, unless you back it up with some proofs from your clients, then it's an unsubstantiated claim, which we always recommend never doing. Don't say you have the world's best cup of coffee unless you've been unanimously voted as the world's best cup of coffee. So including client testimonials in your case studies and project experience narratives is the best way to present in a client-focused way. So it's not just the client that you're selling to, but you're also focusing on your other clients and showcasing their experience with you.
What do you see are some of the biggest mistakes that people make with their proposal process when they're first starting out?
Yeah, there's quite a few, but I would say the top ones are only talking about me. So, theme does this, theme does that, theme does this. If you skim the document and you see that you're using your name more than your client's name, then you want to reframe and rewrite some of your content. Another thing that I see commonly is wasting your energy on opportunities that aren't a great fit. So especially in the formal RFP process, the cost to respond to these RFPs is quite high. It's very time intensive. So a small RFP that's 10 or 20 pages will take maybe 30 or 40 hours of your time, your team's time, a consultant's time to help put together a winning response. And that would be like a low time investment, 30 hours. So with those full RFPs, you really want to make sure that you have a relationship in place before you consider responding to them, or it's probably a waste of your time. So really being wise about what you bid on and what you don't bid on.
So we've got a great question here that talks about, it looks as if a lot of your statement of qualifications and the documents included in the RFP also mirror what's on your website. So do you follow the copy guidelines for the website that you would also have in your RFP, or would there be something that was different about what you're putting in your proposals?
You definitely wouldn't want to copy it verbatim from your website. You want it to be fresh content that they have not seen on your website. So yeah, it's great to have a content heavy website, and it's fine for your SOQ to mirror the site, but I would make sure again to focus on that customization piece. So your company overview might be a little bit more detailed. The way you present the information on a website versus in a document will also be different. So in your SOQ, Statement of Qualifications document, you would want to have more, a lot of visual aids. So call out boxes for your small business status or the year you were founded or quotes from clients. So I think customizing it and having it be different so that if your client just spent all day yesterday combing your website and they're super excited to see your proposal, your SOQ shouldn't just be boilerplate pulled from the website. Like for example, your projects, you might have some projects on the website, but you include different ones in your SOQ for that specific client.
Great
I hope that helps.
information.
Yeah.
That did. So back to when someone requests a proposal and you're still trying to figure them out, they're trying to figure you out. What are some of your tips for ensuring that you keep that conversation interactive and back and forth? And that way they don't just, because unfortunately you and I both have experienced this, where sometimes people just give you a stall or put off by saying, well, yeah, shoot me over a proposal and we'll see if the budget works. Which
Right.
that tells me I really don't want to tell you no, but I don't want to work with you right now. So give me some advice here on navigating that, because I know that so many of the folks listening to this are going to be dealing with that at some point.
Definitely. I would be curious to hear your best practices on this, Brendan, as well. So I'll give you my 2 cents and then I'd love to hear your take. I think keeping them engaged is key, like you mentioned. And so the best way to do that in my mind is to have more bite-sized meetings and actually focus on like small deliverables. So like, oh, let's meet next week and I can actually give you a preview of what that will look like. So if you're a software provider, maybe it's like a sandbox demo of the actual solution. Or in my case, if somebody wants to hire Theme to develop a SOQ or a new proposal template for them, I might actually say, hey, let's sit down next week and I'll walk you through exactly what I have in mind for you and give you a little preview of that. So kind of, I won't say, it's kind of like dangling the carrot, but also providing that value. So I think you've chatted about this, Brendan, is you don't want to follow up, don't just email them to check in or follow up. But actually, if you're going to be following up, say, oh, hey, I saw this great webinar of SOQs that I thought you'd be interested in, or I saw this great, annual report that is right up your alley that would give you some great data points for selling to your customers. So always try to provide value with those interactions when you keep things moving.
Oh, that's great advice. And it's funny because my favorite response with so many of these, I've always recognize that the faster I can get a prospect to revenue, the more likely I am to convert them into a bigger opportunity. So rather than preparing an intensive proposal process, what I will typically sell is a block of time for consulting, which is specifically to go in and evaluate or assess the team. So I will often sell something that may be, I don't know, a $1,500 to $5,000 strategy session or initial workshop to kick off and get a sense of where all the people are and what the process looks like. And then within that, I will typically then create what the project plan looks like. And the project plan, by anyone else's terms, is a scope of work. But with a project plan, it gives me more of an avenue to interact and engage directly with the client and have them participating in the creation of their plan, which means they're buying into it. And if they buy into it, it's going to happen. So
Yeah.
that's how I've done it. And but my market, I will be just transparent with everybody on the call. My market is individuals and small businesses, or it's people within sales teams that everything is pretty transparent. I mean, my pricing is out there on the website. What my workshop includes is out there on the website. And that's significantly different than it used to be. So that's just kind of been the evolution. I've sold the other way, where it is an intensive proposal and it is to a corporate audience. And I got to tell you, the small business market is a lot easier, which is why I have you, Liz.
Yeah, you definitely want to read the room and gauge like what level of detail you provide. So if it's a small business that you've worked with repeatedly and they're just asking you for a quote or an estimate for a one-off, you could definitely put together a significantly smaller proposal. But you might want to consider, if they've asked anybody else for that same type of information, you still want to provide, even if it's 2 pages, some bios on your team, some client testimonials. Just remind them that you're the greatest when you send that quote over, just to make sure that you're keeping top of mind and still demonstrating the value that you provide and that expertise you offer as well. So
something else that I've seen that people do really well in order to be highly competitive in an RFP process is actually help with crafting the requirements for the RFP. So
yes.
Can you give advice on that? Because talk about the ultimate leg up. I've actually had clients, and I think it's a common relationship that you and I both have, that the prospect has actually said, we are required to go through a public RFP process and posting, but we really, 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 really want you. So if there is anything that you can help us with creating in this RFP process that will help us lean in your favor, so much the better. And that's been a government entity, a very large municipality, that stated that to one of my clients and a common friend with Liz and I. So talk about the ultimate. I mean, that was pretty awesome. And it was fun because she actually has a very rare certification. I mean, so rare, like there's only a handful of people in North America that have this designation. So she was actually able to write that requirement for the designation into the RFP. And what would have been a free-for-all with 100 companies applying for the project ended up only having one other company that was able to meet the requirements, and they weren't competitive with where it needed to be, so it was easy for her to win the work. So can you give any advice on how to set yourself up for kind of that situation happening?
Yeah, definitely. So it all goes back to that early sales process and your prospecting efforts and really developing those relationships way before the RFP ever comes to fruition. So when you're in that sales process, I'm going to go back to an IT solution just because that's an easy example to give. Let's say you do a demo of your software and they love it and they want to hire you. But like Brendan said, they're required for that dollar value of purchase to go to RFP. So that is where you have this wonderful opportunity, and you frame it again like client service. You're client focused. So you say, hey, we have this draft statement of work that really helps lay out all the different requirements that a software solution like this needs to meet. And so these are and I'd be happy to share that with you, and you're welcome to use that as you develop your RFP. So that's one way
is
that
wonderful. I love it.
So and then what's really exciting is when you see those requirements actually in the final document. So you're saving them so much time and headache by already scoping it out for them, and they can literally copy paste it into their document. Another way to do that is, like Brendan said, not just your statement of work, but also your experience or personnel requirements. So I've worked on proposals where they say you have to be in business for 5 years. You have to have, like for software again, you have to have customers with a user base of more than 100,000 people. So there's those sneaky types of experience requirements that if you spot those and you didn't help inform that requirement, it might be an indicator that the bid was actually that another competitor might have actually helped suggest some of those requirements to narrow the playing field. And lastly about that is if you see those requirements, they're likely wired for a competitor and you would want to walk away. Like Brendan said, sometimes they want to hire one person and they already worked with that competitor, or they're the incumbent. They already have the contract and they're just required to renew the contract every 2 years, 4 or 5 years. That's a time where you see the current vendor, they're probably happy with that vendor. There's requirements you can't meet. That would be an indicator to not waste your time on that.
Okay. So you have given us some really good stuff today. All right. I want to make one. I like wrapping things up and putting a bow on them whenever I can.
Yeah.
Because I have to tell you, it would be, I can remember back in my early career when I first got started and someone would say, send me a proposal. And I would get this feeling in my stomach that I'm like, oh man, what a waste of time. There's no way this is going to work. And it's so much effort to put it together. And what you've given today is kind of a framework for how you don't have to have that feeling of being unprepared. Instead, these are the steps that you can take in order to be prepared, and you've given us that framework. But I think the most important part of what you've shared today has been really that understanding that, first of all, you don't want to pursue every single RFP. And you gave us great information about making sure that we ask the questions and thoroughly go through the document and understand whether or not it's even going to fit for you. Identify if it looks as if it is so narrowly written for someone else that may have a leg up on you, so that you're not just putting something together. Another exercise that I will throw in here that you didn't talk about, but you started down that path just a little bit, and I want to kind of take a little bit of a sideways trip over here, is recognizing that every proposal has a cost and documenting the cost of that proposal. So Liz went through this when she talked about looking at your time, your staff time, and looking at the fact that it's 30 to 40 hours. And it could be 30 to 40 hours times multiple employees that are participating in this process. And I was working with one client that they designed airport security systems for international airports. And this was in the early stages right after 9/11. And for them to do, they actually would have to do kind of an initial design and build a solution. And the cost was over $100,000. And they actually created a step in their process that's similar to what I talked about, where you pay for that initial assessment or evaluation, and there's a consulting fee and a transaction that happens before the RFP, which actually turns, when they did that and incorporated that into their process, their closing percentages did go from about 20% of proposals that they submitted to about 60%. So do quantify the cost of every step of your sales process and recognize that that proposal can be quite expensive. And make sure the ROI is there before you even pursue it. That's huge. So
yeah, definitely.
Another thing that you've summarized here is put together the templates or the information, but make sure that it's customized according to the information that you find out. And if you don't know the answers to the questions, then rather than just throwing your standard information out there, that's the spot where it's immediately apparent that you need to go have a conversation again with the client and clarify that. And Liz shared that, talking about how much you're going to interact and have the client be engaged, or the potential client be engaged throughout every stage of this process. Do everything you can in order to get a leg up. Oh my goodness, you gave us so much great information. I could be here for another 30 minutes summarizing everything I took out of it. So I think a big question that I have though for you is, how would someone work with you to do this? Because quite frankly, I mean, I don't do this process anymore. And you and I have had this conversation of, if there is an opportunity to pursue work that will require an RFP, you're on speed dial, girlfriend. I got your number. So,
yeah, that's right.
How would someone work with you?
Yeah, so like Brendan mentioned in the beginning, she works with a lot of individuals that are just getting started as fractional service providers, and that's how I got my start as well. So we work with small businesses that are pretty well established, but they could be anywhere from 2 employees to 50 employees typically, that are in that growth mode and wanting to invest in outside help. So a lot of times these companies have a reputation for doing amazing work, but they don't have a bid and proposal expert in-house, and they don't need one full-time. And so that's where we come in. When you have that must-win opportunity that's worth the investment, we can help you with your strategy even before the RFP is released. And then once that RFP comes out, or even if it's a business-to-business proposal, we can help you determine all the elements that should be included in that, provide you with a proposal, a Word template that's really nicely designed. We even can help write and create an SOQ for you from scratch. But what we really excel at are full request for proposal responses, and we provide that full service proposal management, strategy, writing, and design. I'm really, really focused on making sure that your brand and the design really pops and that you make a strong first impression. So my contact information is on the last slide, and you are welcome to reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to chat with you about, anything that you have going on as far as your sales process goes. And do you mind, Brendan, if I touch on, go ahead.
But wait, there's more.
There's more.
Resources.
This is the last one.
Resources, yay.
Yes, so as far as free resources go, winningthebusiness.com is an online publication by the Association of Proposal Management Professionals, AP&P, and they have articles on literally every topic surrounding the quote, bid, proposal, sales cycle. That you could, it's just an amazing resource. So, and I'm really excited to share. I just had my first article published in winningthebusiness.com. That was a big goal of mine. And it was on ghosting the competition. So ghosting is a whole nother strategy that we didn't touch on today, but I definitely encourage you to go read that as well. That's another way to customize your proposals to help get the upper hand over your competition. So apmp.org is the official Association of Proposal Management Professionals website. It costs about $150 to be a member, but you get access to all their past webinars and upcoming webinars. There's dozens of them. So if you're really serious about proposals, that's a great resource. And then a free resource that I recommend to any small business starting out that wants to do government contracting specifically is the Procurement and Technical Assistance Center. Every state has them. Yep, PTAC. Every state has them. They're federally funded. They're free for small businesses, and they will help you with everything from getting a DUNS number in your SAM registration to helping with a capability statement. They won't do what we do, which is write and design your proposals, but they will review your proposals for you. And then if you're looking for federal opportunities, the website is beta.sam.gov to find those formal RFPs. And lastly, shameless plug for my own blog. We put a lot of energy into that the last year, and it's full of great content on topics like SOQs and how to write compelling cover letters.
It is awesome.
Thank you. And this is a plug for Brendan's webinar. You have one weekly, right?
I do have one every week, although we're taking next week off. Holiday weekend. Nice. So we're taking the weekend off. We will be back next week, or we will be back the first weekend, the first Friday in June. And we're going to be talking all about how to set yourself up in the month of June to be successful with your prospecting effort. So I'm going to give you kind of your roadmap for what you need to think about for this time of year in your prospecting effort. So Awesome.
I
Thank you
think
for
I'll
the
have to
shameless
attend.
plug.
Yeah, oh, of course. I think I'll have to attend that one because it's definitely the time of year for me to be recalibrating too. So thank you so much for having me.
All right, this was such great information, and there were several different spots on this that you're probably going to want to go back and listen to again. Pause the recording, snag the resources. I cannot stress enough how amazing Liz has been as a resource. So much so that, I mean, there's actually businesses that will have somebody on staff full time to do what Liz does. And she is a phenomenal resource for a small and growing business to basically outsource this complete element of their business development. So talk about a fractional business development resource. She's phenomenal. I can't speak highly enough about the results that I've had with her. Millions and millions and millions of dollars of business that she's won for my clients. So I am a bystander saying, way to go, girl. And thank you very much. It's been so much fun to actually participate in your journey. I remember when we first met and you had your first client and you were looking at launching and going big, and you are certainly going there. So thanks for sharing such great information with us today. And I am so excited to go and dig into these resources and also share them with everybody that's on the call. I will go ahead and also list several of these in the notes underneath the recording. So I'll wrap it up with a huge thank you to everybody that took the time to sit in and listen today. And for everyone that is listening, if you haven't done this yet, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. And it's been good talking with you. Remember, to get what you want, you've got to help others get what they want. Have a great day, and I wish you all good selling.